Thanks for tuning in to DIY Projects with Pete, Episode 5. Today we're going to be building a real neat X-desk or I-beam desk out of raw lumber that you can find out at any hardware store, and we'll turn it into a beautiful piece of furniture that's going to look great in any home. The main tools we're going to use today are an orbital sander, a drill, kreg jig, miter saw, sanding block, and circular saw. And for lumber, you're going to pick up some 2x6s, 2x4s, a 1x4, and that's about it. The main supplies you're going to need are deck screws, drill bits, kreg screws, spar urethane, stain, paintbrush, and some sandpaper. And for the complete list of instructions, some photos, and links to Ana-White's free plans, check out petesven.com/how-to-build-a-desk. Hey there, welcome to another DIY Projects with Pete episode. I'm your host, Pete Sven, and today I'll show you step-by-step instructions on how I put together this bold-looking I-beamed desk. It could also be used as a side table. Now it measures about 6 feet wide, it's made out of pine, and it costs right around $60 for all of the lumber. I got the plans from Ana-White.com and Shanty2Chic.com. They kind of collaborated on the design work and the plans. I wanted to use them. I thought they did a great job. And so for links to the complete detailed plans, check out my website, and that will take you to Ana-White.com and Shanty2Chic.com. All right, let's go ahead and get started on the project. The first step when making this desk is to measure and then make all of your cuts. Remember to measure twice and cut once. I like to use a speed square to get nice straight lines, and then when you are working on the angles, make sure to adjust your miter saw how you need it. Go ahead and bring that saw down and make all of your cuts. Once that's done, I like to run an orbital sander around the outside edges and over the top of most of the pieces. This cleans them up and makes sure that they're nice and smooth. Now we can begin assembling the two I-beams for each side of your desk. Before putting in any screws, I always pre-drill, and this prevents any splitting or cracking from happening when you put in those screws. Next, put in about 3-inch screws to attach that 1x4 to that 2x4, and then make sure that everything is square. Then you can attach the other 1x4 to the bottom of that I-beam. If you haven't sanded the edges of some of those supports, make sure that you do that prior to assembling. And then we'll go ahead and throw on some glue and put that onto that I-beam. Once that is on, we can attach it either by using a hammer and some nails or by using a gun with about 1.5-inch nails, which is what I did. Just because I have one laying around the shop, it makes things a little bit easier. But you can go ahead and use a hammer and nails if you don't have one. Once you've finished attaching the first support, use your glue and some more nails to attach the other 3 supports. Then you can stand that support up. You've maybe finished both of them by now, but stand that up and put that 2x4 underneath. That's going to add a little bit more dimension to your I-beam. Attach that bottom 2x4 to your I-beam support, and you can either use a nail gun with about 2-inch nails, or if you'd prefer, you can also screw that in as I show in the next step. So here I'm just using those 2-inch deck screws to attach it, and that's what I would definitely do if I didn't have an air gun. This is what your I-beam is going to look like. And then add your last 2x4 to both the top and the bottom. This is going to have straight ends on each side, and just add even more dimension to that bold look of your table. Grab the 1x4 pieces you cut into squares, attach those to the bottom using either a nail gun or screws. It's time to get out your kreg jig and start kreg jigging. This is a pretty fun part. Make sure that you have your kreg jig bit in your drill, and go ahead and make those couple pocket holes. So these boards will be the aprons that connect the two I-beams to each other. Then you can attach both that lower 2x4 that spans on the bottom as well as the 2 top aprons. Use your square kreg jig bit to drive in about 2.5-inch kreg jig screws. Sometimes I'll use spacers underneath when you're doing the lower 2x4 just because it helps in lining things straight, especially when you're working by yourself. Then go and do some more kreg jigging to get the rest of the aprons if you haven't yet. Finish attaching those 2 aprons or the lower 2x4, and if you don't have an extra hand, use a couple clamps to help hold that up. You can see I was doing this all by myself, so I use those clamps there to kind of keep it up and level, and then just put in those 2.5-inch kreg jig screws. Here I'm using the kreg jig upside down to drill a few holes so that I can attach the tabletop to the 2x4. And you can actually do this before the table's assembled if you want, but you can kind of see that I forgot to, so I'm doing it now. It just makes it a little bit harder, but it's still not too bad. Take your 2x4 that you cut for the center support, attach that using your 2.5-inch kreg jig screws. Then take those rear X cross supports and put them into place. If the angles don't match up perfectly, you can always trim them a little bit using your miter saw, and then go ahead and put them into place. You can do this either with screws, nails, or a nail gun. Now, if you're going to use screws to connect these, make sure that you drill pilot holes, and no matter which way you connect it, it's never a bad idea to add a little glue. Let's move on to the tabletop. The first thing I like to do is grab the 2x6s and clean up the rough edges with an orbital sander. Once that's done, then I'll put them all on a flat, even surface. There should be 4 total, and this is where I'll first mark the number. So I'll mark 1, 2, 3, and 4 just so I can put the boards together in the right order when I have the pocket holes. And then I mark for the pocket holes about every 8 inches or so. Make sure you also have your breadboard ends ready. Get out that kreg jig, and we'll drill our pocket holes, like I said, about every 8 inches or so. You can use a 2x4 like I have on the left there as a spacer so that everything is nice and level when you're drilling those pocket holes. Go ahead and move that on down the board, just like I'm doing, and then you'll have enough pocket holes by the time that's done to drill it to the next board, board number 2. Here I'm taking that 2x6, rotating it onto the end side, and drilling pocket holes in each end, 2 of them, and these are the holes that we'll use to connect the breadboards to the top of the table. Now that your pocket holes have all been drilled for the top of the table, I like to clean up the surface just a bit so that all of the 2x6s rest flatly on the surface that you're constructing that tabletop. Then line them up with the boards in order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Get your 2.5-inch kreg jig pocket screws, and we'll attach each 2x6 for the tabletop to each other. Move from left to right and take your time. These are construction grade boards, so nothing is ever perfectly straight. If it's not going together perfectly straight, just back out the screws and try again. I'm speeding up the video to show you the rest of the process where we're attaching each board to each other. And then once all of these boards are connected, we'll move on to the breadboard ends that we'll attach. Now we'll cut the 2 breadboard ends down to size. Remember, we had cut them a little bit long originally, just so that we would be able to match it up perfectly once we got the final 4 boards of the tabletop attached to each other. Then clean everything up, clean those edges up with an orbital sander, and once that's done, we'll grab our 2.5-inch kreg jig screws again and attach those breadboard ends to each side. Sand the bottom a bit, and then make sure to go over all of those pocket holes so you get some of those loose slivers that might be sticking out. Our tabletop is now complete, so go ahead and pick it up, take it over to that table base, and attach it. Just lay it down nice and easy, and make sure that it overlaps on each side as shown in the plans. Attach the tabletop to the base using those pocket holes we had previously drilled in that top apron and then in that middle 2x4. Once you've done that, then you'll want to grab some 3-inch screws and throw them in a few other places just to make it a little bit more secure. Once that's done, let's do a final sanding on the table. So grab your orbital sander with some 120 grit, and then you can go up to 220 if you want it just a little bit more smooth. Today I'm going to finish the table using a walnut stain from Minwax. So grab a clean and lint-free rag, dip it in your stain, and then apply one nice, even coat. Make sure you have proper ventilation when you're doing this, and then let it dry for at least a few hours. It's probably going to be at least 3 to 6. It will look like this when it's completely dry, and then you'll be able to poly it. And I have a complete tutorial on how I did this finish in episode 3, part 2, so check that out. But polyurethane is the last part of the project. Thanks so much for tuning into DIY Projects with Pete, episode 5. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you run into any questions during your build, check out petesven.com/how to build a desk. And don't forget to check out Ana White's page at ana-white.com for all the complete free plans. And she teamed up on this project with Whitney from shanty2chic.com. So check out both those sites. Good luck on your project, have fun, and take care.